Thank you, Joel. Beautiful as always. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. My name is Joni Padduck, and I will be your worship associate for this morning. I want to take a couple of minutes to also welcome our guest speaker for today, the Reverend Jacqueline Conley. And Jacqueline is, or she prefers to go by Jackie. She's here to talk to us about a very important topic this morning in our world today, and that is gun violence. I'll tell you a little bit about Jackie's background. Jackie is a graduate of Southern Methodist University and taught high school history and government. She later graduated from St. Paul's School of Theology in Kansas City and has served Methodist churches, missions, and institutions in 5 different states. She's had a passion for social justice and has been an activist all her life. She is particularly drawn to the mission of Living Without Fear. That's a team at St. Margaret's Episcopal Church here in Palm Desert, because she lost her youngest son to complications related to a gunshot wound when he was only 25 years old. As a survivor of gun violence, she has worked for sensible gun safety legislation and improvement of mental health care in this country to try to help stem violence in our homes, communities, our country, and our world. Welcome, Jackie. Now, as we begin, we acknowledge that we are on the historic homelands of the various bands of Cahuilla people, and we honor the unique relationship that we hope emerges between our community and the indigenous people and their traditional territories. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder to reconcile, honor, recognize, and partner with the Cahuilla people, whose lands and water we benefit from today. And in this congregation, we welcome people of all races and ancestries and cultures, people of all economic statuses and professions, of all mental or physical abilities, people of all sexual orientations and gender identities, of all ages and sizes. We welcome you wherever you come from, whoever you love, whatever your immigration status or civic engagement. We welcome all those who will learn and grow with us as we commit together to embrace the rich and beautiful diversity of the world and to build a community centered in justice, compassion, and love. You are welcome here, and we're glad you're with us this morning. And to those of you at home, I extend a special welcome. This morning, we'd like to take a moment to greet newcomers and visitors. If you're here for the first time or if you're returning after a bit of an absence and you're comfortable to do so, you're invited to stand or raise your hand. And Cheryl will come to you with a mic. So if you could just wait for a moment till she gets to you with the mic so that the folks at home can hear you as well. So any newcomers this morning or people that haven't been here in a while? I see a couple of faces that haven't been here in a while, but I'm not sure if I should call them out. There are 2 of them. If you didn't do it, Stan, I was going to.
Well, it's a delight to be back here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. This is a loving, wonderful community. For those who are new, and I see new faces from when I was here, I was the music director here for many years and really enjoyed it. And I'm delighted to be back.
And we are delighted to see you. And for those who might not know his name, he's Stan Hill, and he's also the musical director for Modern Men, our wonderful chorus here in the desert. And on the other side, we have another familiar face, and Cheryl's making her way.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Nile. I'm actually a longtime friend of UUCLD, but I've had a rather long absence, and I'm certainly glad to be back. I was here, I think, 2 Sundays ago, so I wasn't sure if I qualified as like someone who, but it certainly is a pleasure to be back.
Welcome back. Great to see you, Lauren. That's Lauren Nile. Any other newcomers?
Lauren is going to be in the pulpit here with me on November the 5th. If you have never heard Lauren speak, you are in such a treat.
And for the folks that either didn't hear or for the folks at home, that was Bryna Bloom, and she said that Lauren is going to be in our pulpit on November 5th. Yes, and she's a marvelous speaker, and we welcome you back with open arms, Lauren. Glad to have you back. Anyone else that's new would like to say hello and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from? I think, oh, yep, there's one more.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jennifer, and I'm local here. And I kept bringing my puppy to the dog park, and I drove by a few times. I'm like, I'm definitely interested. And I watched one of your transmissions online. And, I made it out this Sunday because I was really interested in what you guys were preaching and saying. So, yes.
Oh, welcome, Jennifer.
Thank
We're
you.
glad you're here. Reverend Ian, what do you call that? The dog park? Dog park evangelism. Evangelism, that was the word. Dog park evangelism. We've had several visitors from the dog park, interestingly enough, so you're doing a great job, Reverend Ian. Okay, now we have a couple of announcements. Okay, the first one, next Sunday is our in-gathering worship service where we will welcome back our members who are returning from their other home congregations or are returning from summer explorations of distant lands. Join us as we celebrate our regathering as a community at a potluck salad bar after the service. The board will supply salad greens, rolls, and beverages. We ask that you bring an ingredient for the tossed salad or that you bring a separate salad. We'd like to know if you'll be attending and what you might bring. Sign up with Jane's on after the service. She will also be able to answer your questions. You will also be receiving an email on Tuesday where you can sign up. And Jane, if you'd raise your hand, she's out on the patio. She's got a sign-up sheet, so please see her after the service. And my next announcement. Okay, this is a reminder from Carol Lavoie, and most of you have seen Carol Lavoie out on the patio these last several weeks. She said, would you mind reminding folks this Sunday that donation forms are due this Tuesday, and tickets for the auction will go on sale on Wednesday. Purchases can be made through the constant contact form they will receive on Wednesday or in the newsletter or on the patio after services. Price is $10 a person to attend the auction. Please see Carol after the service. Where is Carol? I saw her earlier. She's probably on the patio. That's probably true. Okay, and I think this is our last announcement. Many of you are aware of Script to Stage to Screen, the performing arts arm of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert. And we are opening our season on Friday and Saturday, October 20th and 21st, with a show called Together. As you know, it's a staged reading, but it's fully blocked, and there's actors moving around. It's not people standing at a music stand, as is true with a lot of staged readings. I'll just read you a brief description of the show. Helen, an astronomer, has discovered an asteroid will hit the Earth in 6 months. As chaos is about to envelop the world, Helen visits her ex-husband, David, late one evening after he has concluded a stressful dinner party. What could go wrong? So I hope you'll join us. Tickets are $15. We've had some substantial price increases, so it went up from $10 to $15, but it's still the best theater value in the desert. Okay, if you would like to be on our email list to learn more about us and our programming, please contact us at admin, that's ADMIN, @uucod.org. And now I will ring our Tibetan bowl to begin our service, and then we can listen to Joel playing our lovely music for centering. Our opening words this morning come from Reverend Timothy Haley, a retired UU minister from Port Townsend, Washington. Amid all the noise in our lives, we take this moment to sit in silence, to give thanks for another day, to give thanks for all those in our lives who have brought us warmth and love, to give thanks for the gift of life. We know we are on a pilgrimage here, but a brief moment in time. Let us open ourselves here, now, to the process of becoming more whole, of living more fully, of giving and forgiving more freely, of understanding more completely the meaning of our lives here on this earth. And now if you'll stand as you're willing and able and join us in the opening hymn, We'll Build a Land, and Reverend Ian will lead us in song. You have it. And now please read along with me as we light our chalice with our unison aspiration. The words are on the screen. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. And now Mel Wilkinson will come up and light our BioPark candle, And as she lights it, please read along on the with the words on the screen. We light these candles in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color as we journey together towards spiritual wholeness. May we, as a beloved community, work to dismantle racism and all forms of oppression. May we live out our principles so that justice, dignity, and equity for all prevail. Thank you, Mel. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from an article in The Atlantic published May 25th, 2022 by Clint Smith, entitled "No Parent Should Have to Live Like This." Clint Smith is an American writer, poet, scholar, and a New York Times bestselling author. He is a staff writer for The Atlantic, and he wrote the article the day after the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 children and 2 teachers were killed and 17 others wounded. And just as a reminder, the Uvalde mass shooting happened only 10 days after the Buffalo, New York Tops grocery store shooting, which left 10 dead and 3 wounded. I want to live in a country where my presence is not seen by some as an existential threat, but this feels like a fantasy. I want to walk past the school where my son will attend kindergarten next year and see a place that will keep him safe. But this is impossible. We live in a country that has failed us, where legislation is written and erased by the gun lobby, where manipulations and distortions of the Second Amendment rights prevent politicians from enacting any semblance of sensible laws that would at least attempt to prevent this, where claims about what our founders wanted supersede the slaughter we see right in front of us, where the cocktail of easily accessible guns and the normalizing of extremist views makes nowhere feel safe. There is no other country in the world where this happens. And the fact that it does happens with such frequency, is reflective of a choice that has been made. But just because a choice has been made doesn't mean different choices aren't possible. Different choices are possible. And now I'd like to ask the ushers to come forward to collect the offering this morning for the good works of this congregation. This is the time in our service where we share the joys and sorrows expressed by this congregation. And I'd like to ask Bryna Bloom to come up for a moment.
Good morning, all. I came this morning because I know it's a very safe place for me to be grieving. So on behalf of my Jewish brothers and sisters, and all of us who have a heart and a conscience, please observe a moment of silence with me as we grieve the innocent people who are the victims of this horrific act of terrorism.
I'll now share the rest of the joys and sorrows written in our book this morning. A candle of grief and healing for all those killed, wounded, and kidnapped in the Middle East. Prayers for a swift end to this conflict. Gratitude for our Sacred Grounds team, especially Rod, John, and Mel, for making our patio extension and celebration garden a reality through their hard work and dedication. A candle of joy for the artwork of Jean and John gracing our beautiful new celebration garden. A happy birthday to John Elrod, longtime friend of Dave and Randy and a friend of UCOD. We send our love. I think that's all of them. And now let's just take a few moments to meditate and reflect not only on those joys and sorrows expressed here this morning, but also on those we hold in our hearts, not ready to be shared aloud just yet. Please just sit quietly and comfortably for a few moments. I'd like to share a Buddhist blessing for happiness. May all suffering quickly cease, and may all happiness and joy be fulfilled. And now, if you'd please join me in our hymns for meditation, Spirit of Life and Fuente de Amor. And now I would like to ask Reverend Jackie to come up. And she has agreed to stay after service for a few minutes if you have questions for her, rather than doing them at the end of her talk. So please see Jackie. I don't know if we're outside or inside today, but during coffee hour.
I'm going to have water first. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak about the consequences of gun violence in our communities and in our country. Are you hearing this? Yeah. And how we can overcome those consequences. I want to begin by sharing my son Brandon's story with you. Brandon was my soulmate. He had almost died at birth and many other times, which propelled him to a spiritual plane that most of us never achieve. Growing up, he was always a challenge. Playground bully, so smart and mischievous. always bouncing from one extreme to another, either the loving little angel or the devious devil. Straight A's in high school, 4.0 in pre-med, some scrapes with the law and some experimentation with drugs. He was a senior in high school in Charlotte, North Carolina, when we got the call that all parents dread. Your son is in the emergency room. He's been shot. We need your permission to perform exploratory surgery. He has a bullet through his abdomen. He may be paralyzed, sterilized, or be bleeding internally. There may be damage to other organs. Brandon was a 220-pound bodybuilder. He had stepped in to defend his best friend, Omar, who was smaller and was being harassed by some high school gang members. He pushed one of them out of Omar's face. The kid fell back to the ground. He had a gun in his pocket, turned it up, and shot. There were over 30 kids at the party who showed up at the emergency room, but none of them could say they had seen the gun. It was concealed in his jacket pocket. The doctors thought Brandon was fortunate. The bullet had entered his stomach, hit his pelvis, and ricocheted through his bladder to lodge in his buttocks muscle. The exploration and bladder repair left an 18-inch incision. His recovery was long. He missed 6 weeks of school. He had an allergic reaction to the stitches that should have dissolved, that the doctors mistook as an infection. They gave him massive doses of Cipro, a new powerful antibiotic. This compromised his immune system, which led to his being hospitalized again with scarlet fever, which almost killed him. He would experience debilitating side effects of that drug later in life, which would contribute to his death. The resultant joint pain he endured led him to self-medicate with alcohol and painkillers, the combination of which would cause brain damage, leading to a collapse of his lungs. The young man who shot Brandon returned to school immediately, with no seeming consequences. This led to a type of revenge warfare by Brandon's friends, who were distraught over the fact that this kid had not been punished for attempted murder. There was a drive-by shooting to one of the students' homes, and we discovered that Brandon had purchased a .357 Magnum off the streets because he feared for his life. No charges were brought against the shooter because the assistant DA told me those were 2 white kids. So we thought the parents would get together and work this out. We're in Charlotte, remember? After hiring a lawyer and demanding some action to be taken, a new DA was assigned to the case. Finally, the shooter was charged with assault with a deadly weapon and was put on probation for 5 years. He was required to pay for Brandon's out-of-pocket medical bills and do 100 hours of community service. He later violated his probation and served several years in jail. Brandon was able to graduate from high school because I tutored him through his recovery. He laid out a semester and then went to college, always making exceptional grades, but struggling with the consequences of his gunshot wound, both physically and emotionally. A counselor he was seeing prior to his death told me after his death that he was suffering great pain in his joints and trying to keep it from us. She also said, using personality theory, she surmised that Brandon's gunshot wound had come at a very vulnerable time for him, when he should have been learning coping skills and who he was independent from his parents. He was traumatized by the effects of the disaster, from which he never recovered. Brandon was 25 when he died. This is only one story about the effects of gun violence, not only on the victim and the perpetrator, but also the surviving family members, the friends, the neighbors, the whole communities who experience gun violence. Multiply that by more than 115 people who die every day from gunshot wounds in America. That has grown to over 40,000 gun deaths a year. No other modern industrialized first world nation comes close to that. Compare our acceptance of those numbers to the reaction we've had to losing 3,000 in 9/11. The greatest cause of death for children and teens in America is gun violence. In his song, By Degrees, Mark Aureli sings, "I've seen little hands on little shoulders, children in a line. I've seen them led away from school as the shots rang out inside. And I thought something had to change, and somehow it's become routine. We can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees." Over the last several years, we've had a school shooting on average every week. In 2019, I heard the Parkland High School students speak at an event in Palm Springs. They told us how their assault on their school and friends had traumatized them and that they are now afraid to go to school. I witnessed this with Brandon and his friends. I called my grandchildren, who were 17 and 13 at the time, living in a small mountain town in Colorado, asked them if they were afraid to go to school. They both said yes, and they have active shooter drills often that reinforce that fear. This violence affects all of our children and grandchildren, but is most devastating in some communities of color, where the children and teens experience violence daily on the streets of their neighborhoods, fueled by the accessibility of guns. The public debate in America about private ownership of guns is emotional, contentious, often nasty, and sometimes violent. Gun enthusiasts contend that American exceptionalism means that we have an unusual relationship with guns because of our history and the Second Amendment to our Constitution. They point out that guns have played a significant role in American history. For many of our people, guns occupy a place at the heart of what it means to be an American. Leonard Skinner captures this connection well in his 70s country western song, God and Guns. God and guns keep us strong. That's what this country was founded on. Well, we might as well get up and run if we let them take our God and guns. For many Americans, guns represent values such as faith, freedom, family, self-sufficiency, patriotism. They fear a government confiscation of their guns, which would mean they could not be citizen protectors, shepherds protecting the sheep. They could not defend their families in this violent and hostile world. Our Bill of Rights was not the first document to declare the right to bear arms. The English Declaration of Rights of 1689 stated that Protestant subjects may have arms for their defense. For 218 years, judges in America overwhelmingly concluded that the Second Amendment authorized states to form militias, what we now call National Guard. Militias were made up of ordinary citizens who had a duty, not a right, to be armed so that they could be trained and ready for conflict. They were using muskets, not military assault weapons that fire 90 to 180 rounds of ammunition per minute. The courts took the view that the amendment was about a collective right to bear arms for the sake of national defense. Then in 2008, the Supreme Court upended centuries of precedent. In the case of District of Columbia versus Heller, an opinion written by Justice Antonin Scalia declared that the Constitution confers a right to own a gun for self-defense in the home. The majority opinion explicitly states that view is consistent with reasonable limits on the right. Throughout American history, cities like New York and Chicago and others have enforced limits on gun ownership. Without doubt, there is some truth in the American myth about guns. From colonial period through the time of the early republic, guns were the products of individual craftsmen and were needed for the life on the farm and the frontier. In the 19th century, guns became a mass-produced commodity. Additional markets needed to be created. This led to hunting becoming more than a means for getting food. Hunting with guns was promoted as a recreational activity, and target shooting became a popular sport. In the 20th century, receiving a rifle was a rite of passage for many young men, ushering them into manhood. The movement from frontier to shooting range was followed by a more ominous transition: the move from recreation to armed citizenry. Today, most gun owners cite self-defense as the primary reason for owning a gun. In her book, The Gunning of America, Pamela Haag argues that the current gun culture is not a product of frontier mystique, evil intent, or some form of American exceptionalism. She claims that the primary historical factor leading to the gun culture today is simply business. Capitalism drives the gun industry, which rakes in $9 billion annually. So one reason Americans love guns is that the people who sold guns to them elicited that love. Winchester had the boy plan, advertising that every real American father or mother is proud these days to have a boy who can place 5 shots in the bullseye and wear a Winchester sharpshooter medal. They claimed that a gun will make a man of any boy, teaching him the trait of self-reliance. Guns were thus tied to class and masculinity, and then merged with other social fights and debates. David Brooks in the New York Times article points out that a century ago, the forces of industrialization swept over agricultural America. Today, people in agriculture and industrial America legitimately feel that their way of life is being threatened by post-industrial society. The members of this resistance have seized on issues like guns, immigration, the flag, as places to mobilize their counter-assault. Guns are a proxy for larger issues. They're part of a cluster of issues related to identity, an identity they feel is under threat. Brooks goes on to say, guns stand for freedom, self-reliance, and the ability to control your own destiny. Gun rights are about living in a country where families are tough enough and responsible enough to stand up for themselves in a dangerous world. For many, gun use and ownership represent complex responses to economic decline, social disorder, inadequate police protection, and just plain fear, stoked by the gun magazines, the National Rifle Association leadership, and gun manufacturers and lobbyists. Following the passage of the assault weapons ban in the 90s, the gun industry saw a drop in their profits. They became more aggressive in attaching emotional value to firearms in their marketing strategies. If you look at the gun magazine ads over the last decades, they have sold guns as a symbol of masculinity and power, and assault weapons as the necessary guns of protection in this violent world. So this right to own a gun, even a military assault weapon, seems in conflict with others' rights to live to life and safety without worrying about being shot at the store, the theater, the school, at work, in the park, at a concert, actually anywhere we go. How are we, as people of faith and with concern for human safety and sanity, to respond to this public health crisis in America? It takes so many lives through gun violence, including mass and individual murders, inner-city gangs, suicides, assaults, and senseless accidents. We must start by examining our own personal violence within ourselves. Excuse me. How is your self-talk? Are you looking and forgiving? Are you loving and forgiving of your own mistakes and shortcomings? Or do you berate yourself and get angry with yourself? Do you practice forgiveness and compassion for yourself and others? We live in a culture that has exchanged civility for hostility and violence, even in our language and our demeanor, in our most benign, everyday interactions. We are called to be peacemakers. In our families and our communities, we can do this by living a life of nonviolence. We must first learn to hear one another with respect, compassion, and curiosity, and not demonize those who think differently from us. Listening is more than waiting for my turn to talk. The goal is, according to the business guru Stephen Covey, to seek to understand before being understood. Mahatma Gandhi taught that Jesus was the greatest practitioner of nonviolence, and that his teachings offered humanity a new vision for the coming of a nonviolent world, which he called the kingdom of God. From Gandhi's perspective, the gospel story portrays the nonviolent Jesus as a movement organizer. He's training his disciples to be nonviolent in every situation, so they will have tools at their disposal when he sends them into the world of violence and empire as agents of disarming love and God's reign. Gandhi used that example to create his nonviolent movement that freed India from colonial rule. We have other modern examples of the power of nonviolence in Martin Luther King Jr., Congressman John Lewis's Good Trouble, Mandela, Bishop Tutu, Nobel Peace Prize winners Malala and Nargis Mohammadi. John Deere, the Catholic priest and internationally known peace activist, came to St. Margaret's Episcopal Church in Palm Desert last March to lead a workshop using his book, Walking the Way. He taught us 3 steps to leading a nonviolent life, all which must be done at the same time. First, make peace within oneself. Stop the negative self-criticism and self-admonishment. Second, forgive and love everyone we know, including family, friends, colleagues, and strangers who have hurt us at any time in our lives. And third, put one foot into a public action movement. We can support organizations that are fighting for gun sense in America, like the Brady Campaign, Everytown Moms Demand Action, Gabby Gifford's organization, Sandy Hook Promise, and many more. We can vote for our legislative representatives who support sensible gun safety legislation. No one advocates taking guns from law-abiding citizens, but we need common sense restrictions on gun availability and on those who would harm themselves and others. We can celebrate the passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act on June 25, 2022, the first federal gun legislation in 30 years. It addresses many of the underlying causes of gun violence by giving financial support to states to implement crisis intervention orders. It invests in children and family mental health services. It extends protection for victims of domestic violence. It provides funding for school-based mental health and supportive services, funding school safety resources. It clarifies the definition of federally licensed arms dealers and cracks down on those who are evading licensing requirements. Governor Newsom just signed 23 bills that support the implementation of these same ways of addressing communities and individuals who are at risk of gun violence. California ranks #1 of the states for having sensible gun safety. We can celebrate that. And ranks last in number of deaths by gun violence per capita. We can learn the things of peace rather than studying and supporting war and violence. What are the things that make for peace? The Sermon on the Mount catalogs a long to-do list for peace, love, nonviolence, and justice. Your 8 principles that I just read are wonderful. I mean, they state all of these things that move us toward living a nonviolent life of peace. So I commend you all. Peace comes through regular prayer and meditation and trust in the God of peace. Peace is demonstrated through love for neighbor and for enemies. It can be achieved through nonviolent resistance to evil. Peace can result in compassion for everyone. It's fostered by forgiveness toward those who have hurt us. It calls for reconciliation for everyone. Peace demands justice. There's no peace without justice. And opening our hearts to love, to God's loving grace. Amen.
Thank you, Jackie. And now I would like you to stand as you're willing and able and join us in our closing song, Blowing in the Wind. And Cheryl would like you to hold hands and sway with the music as we sing, if that so moves you. Reverend Ian will lead us.
And before we begin, I just say, we left the words as they were when they were written. And please understand man to be an expansive term.
And now we will, oops, you're a little taller than I am. Now we'll extinguish the chalice, if you would join me in the words that are up on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I'm going to close our service this morning with an Apache blessing. May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the breeze blow new strength into your being. May you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. Go in peace, friends.